Welcome back. You're watching the program. On to the second segment of New Day KE this Monday morning, 25th of November 2019. So before we get to Kaberia, of course, with regards to the topic at hand, and that is the Building Bridges initiative set to issue the report tomorrow, Tuesday, to President Kenyatta and the opposition chief Raila Odinga. We get, first of all, to hear from members of parliament in support of the initiative and who have been supporting the coming together of the president and the opposition chief ever since March 2018.
That they can bring it on Tuesday, and I assure you that as soon as I receive it, mimi nitasoma, lakini pia at the same time nitapatia all Kenyans jameni tusome. This is an opportunity to engage in meaningful and peaceful discourse. Kwa hivyo hakuna haja ya matusi, sijui kama wale wanasema hawaitaki na hata hawajui nini iko ndani.
On Tuesday, 26th October or November 2019. These misrepresentations are designed to sow confusion and division among Kenyans at a time when there is a strong national consensus on the need for cohesion, honesty, and ambition to change our country for the better.
Lakini tangu handshake hii itimie na ifanyike, mnatembea Nairobi mpaka asubuhi, mnauza vitu vyenu vizuri.
Kama unaofati rais anasema aenda hivi, Raila anasema twende pamoja, let's build one Kenya, na wewe unatangatanga, my friend, kichwa yako lazima iko na shida kidogo.
All right, those in support of the Building Bridges initiative and President Kenyatta, who during a graduation ceremony on Friday did speak to the matter and said he will, just like any other Kenyan, read and then allow Kenyans to get a copy of the recommendations that will be brought forward by the task force chaired by Garissa Senator Yusuf Haji. Kaberia, if I may come to you before Linda poses the next question to Benji Ndolo. One of the pivotal issues that was at the center during the report compilation process of the task force was how to include or how perhaps to star the TJRC report with the recommendations of the task force, enmeshing the two. And the TJRC, of course, handed over to the president in 2013. 6 years later, it's just gathering dust. No recommendations. Parliament never debated it in depth. And it does mention one of the task force chairperson, Yusuf Haji, adversely because of the gruesome nature of how the KANU government undertook its business during its 24-year tenure. Do you see some form of double standardness in this particular case? And with that regard, then, the TJRC adversely mentioned Yusuf Haji, the Garissa senator. Does it erode the morality here with regards to them now adopting the high moral ground? And will they have, perhaps after handing out the report, will they have the moral authority to tell Kenyans that we have found these other recommendations and this is how to get out of the current mess in the country?
Well, it's absolutely true that when the task force was being constituted, and even when you look at even the membership of the task force and what the people even were proposing the members, you can see it really took a political space, as I earlier said. But now looking at the truth, justice, and reconciliation, already it's not in public on the perpetrators. The people are really mentioned. And there's so many years down the line, more than 5 years down the line, the Kenyans do not know actually what's even the recommendation and how the implementation is being done. And the same case, and those are the same people who we have seen being even recycled now to this BBI task force, specifically like Yusuf Haji. He was adversely mentioned on the TJRC report, and now he's the one now coming now as the chairperson of the BBI to give now the proposals and all that to champion and say, this is now our findings. But now I see there is no double standard because having Yusuf Haji as the chair, and this is the same person who was mentioned under the 9-point agenda, we talked of things like the national ethos distribution of resources. This is like having a hyena now being a judge on the matters concerning the sheep and the cattle, because we don't expect fairness, because these are the same people who are being accused, and these are the same people we're expecting solutions from them. So we cannot have solution from the problems. And this now, it means that it's something which we really need to look at very well, and the president should be able now to even to be able to look at those issues next time when even setting up such task forces.
All right, a clear indication that the people of Kenya are not sleeping in a clear way, we are able to note, of course, that these are the very same figures. And I think, I don't know whether you guys were able to see that clip of oldies at some point in time, you know, that were challenging the likes of Murkom and telling them that, you know what, enough is enough. We've voted for you people, but, you know, the heart is cutting across. Everyone who voted for you, whether good or bad, whatever it is, the tough times are mated upon every other Kenyan in equal measures or on equal measures. Do you suppose that we've learned, or maybe we are angered enough to a point where by then this is the time where we're going to stand and say that, you know what, we're not going to go by this, because then again it's not addressing our very own issues. Looking at the fact that, you know, we're that kind of a people whereby we're focused on matters tribe, we're focused on matters affiliation, we're focused on matters of how, of course, we're affiliated to this particular person, to this particular individual, and how much numbers they get to enjoy for us. Have Kenyans reached to that point whereby they can say enough is enough?
Linda, that's a good question. And what usually is required is a unique leader that is able to tap into that sentiment and harness it and provide leadership and direction. I often give the example that, you know, everything that can't be done is always done. And I remember in the early 90s, I was a young boy, and the whole discussion and the whole struggle for multipartyism was there. And my dad was a civil servant, and there was an assumption, a presumption that if you envisage or discuss the exit of Kanu from power, you're wasting time, you're being dramatic, that it's not possible. As a matter of fact, and I give this example often, a man in Kitui was arrested in a bar, I think it was 1989, for saying, one day Kibaki ataongoza hii nchi. You know, that was like, Kibaki then wasn't a vice president. Yeah, right. That was like treason to say stuff like that. And he was locked up. If you look at the history, I don't know how much history Kaberia reads, but this is very interesting history of our own country.
In other words,
with names and events.
People never believed that Kanu will at one point leave power.
Yeah.
Precisely. And now Kibaki is a retired president of many years. Moi, who nobody thought would leave power, is a retired president of many years. Anything that people think is very difficult is actually absolutely possible. I was looking at a video yesterday of how Trump became president. It's very interesting. And I don't support Trump, everybody knows that. But just to look at how he positioned himself and spoke to the issues and was able to undercut a lot of all the different underpinnings of race and what have you, somewhat in a negative fashion, and tap into that sentiment where people feel like the system is messed up, their voices don't count, they feel helpless, they feel angry. Just that was enough to propel him. And so the same thing can happen here in Kenya. And the whole thing of, you know, the tribal divisions are very, you know, they're very artificial and manufactured. And that, by the way, goes to the issue of expanding the executive to put in a prime minister. Kaberia, how does including a prime minister in Kenya today improve the cost of fuel or the cost of power? How? There's absolutely no reason, no sane argument as to how that happens. And again, we must remember that anywhere you have two centers of power, including in the so-called Nusumkate government, that was a very noisy arrangement, a mongrel, you know,
to pull the country out of the skirmishes.
Yes, and then a very noisy arrangement where the prime minister says this, the president says that, the president overturns or overrules him, and the only thing that would bring both sides of the cabinet together, Linda, was looting.
Yeah.
So that when they're looting or increasing salaries, they're all in together as government. And the rest of the time, they're just bickering and arguing, and Kenyans lose.
But the uniqueness of a leader, allow me to just
terrible.
ask this, the uniqueness of a leader that you're talking about, do you suppose, or do you see this in any of the leaders that we have? Is it Ruto, who they're likelihoods that he's probably going to support the BBI despite the content?
That's a good question. For that political revolution to happen, for that movement to happen, the leader would have to be someone who has no links and no past with the current with the status quo.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because a lot of all the current leaders we have now themselves have their teething and their training and their upbringing in KANU. And so in actual fact, Raila included, is a KANU former Secretary General. In actual fact, and these guys are all the past, so completely.
So in other words, we are speaking about a politically polluted establishment.
Completely polluted. And actually why this is a good example I gave of Trump is because I was looking at, it's a fantastic documentary, and I'll make sure, actually I'll share it with you because it's on my phone. And when he announced, coming from New York into Washington, etc., there was collective laughter. And you can imagine,
And how President Obama bashed him during this, the dinner in White House.
I don't know how many of you guys have been to Washington, but Washington is highly political, more than Kenya. You have the K Street, the lobbying street. That's where a lot of the big-time lobbying is done. And these are people that are very well-educated, very polished. And so there was like collective laughter. In fact, it says how they viewed him as a cartoon. And this is a billionaire with his own building in downtown, gold-plated and all of that.
Trump Tower.
And his own Boeing 747 plane aircraft. But to them, he was just a collective joke to the Republican establishment, to the political establishment, and yet he was able to just keep going blunder after blunder, crisis after crisis, all the way to victory. And even till now, you can see how the establishment has fought him.
Yes.
But it's just interesting then to see that the important thing here is that it's someone who has no links. The only links Trump had was as a donor, mostly to Democrats and what have you. So he's not even a bona fide Republican. And so that is the most crucial ingredient, is that you've not served in government, you've not served in politics. William Ruto was in KANU. Uhuru Kenyatta, YK92. Uhuru Kenyatta was KANU chairman. Gideon Moi is KANU chairman.
And the father
Kalonzo
was the party
Musyoka
leader.
was deputy speaker, National Assembly.
Musalia
under
Mudavadi
KANU.
served in Moi cabinet
Musalia Mudavadi was Moi's vice president.
and served in the cabinet. Well, a lot to speak
Was
to
it not the
because-
case? Was it not the case during the multi-party? That exit from, of course, single-party system, and of course to that point of a multi-party.
Yeah, and you see, and Linda, this explains why, for some of these guys, and I've consulted with many of these leaders, and in a sense, it's like they hear what you're saying, but it's like kind of this distant, ideal, pie in the sky thing. Because for them, again, the way our politics is structured, the people are only good to be used and abused. They are only good for votes. I was actually through Kibra again last week on my way to Langata. And my lead there told me how, you know how these slums formed and expanded? Is politicians importing voters from rural areas. Kuja unipigie kura. And they get here, they have no education, they work as artisans, juakali, etc. And you live in poverty and squalor, and you really cannot go back because what is also there in the village, and everyone's looking at you in Nairobi.
Okay.
So just imagine that is the kind of setting within which, what can you get from that kind of setting?
Okay.
Absolutely nothing but poverty.
Let me get to Kabera, because we'll be shortly joined equally by Kenneth Chesa, who is a lecturer at the University of Nairobi School of Law. And if I may come to you, Kabera, as we usher in Kenneth Chesa, let me just take this a notch higher, because Ethiopia in 2020 will be facing an election, and the Prime Minister has decided to disband the ruling EPRDF party that was mainly an ethnic party of the Oromos, the Amharas, the Somalis, and the Tigray. And he said there's need for the national vision of the country to have that national discourse and create a party that will, in the future, address Ethiopia's deep-seated ethnic federalism. However, with regards to the Kenyan affair of the BBI, which is set to reconcile the country, look into the electoral issue, the national ethos, and bring together the deep divisions that normally punctuate the process after every electoral cycle, it seems that it's without one person, who is the Deputy President, William Ruto. Number one, what do you think informed William Ruto missing from the mathematics? And then number two, was it the perception that because he was a hardliner? And how will they go to Kenyans amid hard economic times, the dire economic situation, and convince Kenyans that this will address the political problems in this country, and that going forward to 2022 and beyond, we are going to be having sane political environment after you people, the Kenyan people, are going to be voting?
Well, thank you so much, Ayub. First, let me take you back to history a little bit now and looking at this man, Ruto. and the way where it's come from in terms of the political alignment. And we've seen a very good trajectory growth of Ruto from the YK92 when he just was a young person and he started campaigning for President Moi. And we've seen him rise through the ranks and even getting a lot of favors and from President Moi. And even now during the Grand Coalition, he was a very appointment to ODM. And now we've seen him now becoming the kingmaker when it came now to electing the President Uhuru Kenyatta, when we saw him from being in ICC and coming together and mobilizing all the votes from the Rift Valley and some other parts of the country. Now, the thing with Ruto is that he has not come from a well-known dynasty line. And there is no much history on where Ruto has come from in terms of the family association and all that. But now, at the place he is playing is in the table whereby the son of the first vice president and the son of the first president, and also then we have
first vice president.
Sorry, the first vice president, and also the first president.
Yeah.
Yes, that's Kenyatta and Jaramogi.
Jaramogi, yeah.
And now on the other side, we are seeing also the Gideon factor, the son of the second president. But now looking at Ruto himself, is despite all that, the disadvantage of the background, is a strong politician who you can never ignore in terms of his charisma, in terms of the energy, in terms of even the strategy for politics. But now when you look at even the history, there is a very big tendency that those people who their fathers or their families have been in the leadership, they really want to continue that dynasty. So that's why Ruto is generally missing in the maths, because we've seen that these people, it's assumed the Uhuru and Raila, they have some other agreement whereby they really want to proceed with the dynasty, which was said by their fathers.
While he's missing on the math, he clearly is a part of it 101%, whichever way this goes. You know, if of course it sails through, equally it's going to alter his ambitions. If it does not sail through, equally it's going to alter his ambitions, because then there are likelihoods that the two are going to gang against him, you know, thinking that of course he's the main person who made this not to sail through. So where does it place him, of course, politically as it stands? And generally the people of Kenya, because then we all are eyeing that particular one seat, and everyone is talking about, of course, inclusivity.
Well, let me tell you something, Leader, very interesting. You'll find out that, as my friend here saying, that things which people really think they don't happen, these are the things which actually come to play. And now there's been a lot of assumption that the presidency always has really been very influential in determining who will take after. And now we saw that Uhuru, that's why you've heard some people saying that ukona deni yetu, you have a debt to pay because we supported you this time you are here now to pay the debt. But now we see that things are changing because there are various, you know, politics about interest. And to look at who will be able now to bring the interests of, let's say, your community, your people, and all that. And sometimes president does not even make decision by his own. You see that there are other business people, there are other influential people who are actually influencing the president, because they feel when this, either the Ruto takes over, there will be a lot of people being insecure in terms of the investment and all that. So that's why you see there's a lot of alignment towards having him assigned. But now, with the alignment of the Tangatanga and Kieleweke we are seeing, it's clearly that between now the president himself, as we are saying, Ruto is part of that. It's just part of the presidency and the government at large. But now when it comes now to the politics and all that, it's now a totally different space.
All right, a different space altogether. We continue with this conversation. And officially we have another guest joining us, Kenneth Chesa, lecturer of law in the University of Nairobi. And of course, we also seek to hear his sentiments as regards to this particular issue that we are discussing this morning. But before we come to him...
Is he brother to the former minister?
I am not aware.
let's spread a bit so at least we're able to figure. Are you?
I'm not aware.
Well, of course, well answered as a lecturer. But coming to you, exactly, we're discussing the BBI and the fact that it's going to be out tomorrow, presented to the president and later on to the public. In a culture where people are not fond of going through some of the details of these key, reports that that always determine what is left of us as a country, do you suppose then it was necessary for us to go that direction, or we could have as well implemented the constitution that we still do not even understand what details, it holds within? And what are the likelihoods then that the people of Kenya, who are considered to be the public, will go through this critically and make candid discussions in the event that it drives us to the ballot?
Thank you very much. My submission is that Kenyans are not likely to go through this document. Kenyans have a culture of not going through public documents. And as it is now, the major political players have taken position regarding the BBI. And therefore, if you are from Tanga, already the head of Tanga, the deputy president, has said BBI is a bad idea, which must be rejected.
Was it strategic for them to dilly-dally so that at least we also do not present, or they do not present Kenyans with enough time to be able to go through that?
What I'm thinking is that after BBI was leaked to the principals or presented to the principals before being taken to the public, the principals had issues, the two principals, President Kenyatta and Raila Odinga. And therefore they took time to amend the BBI to fit their interests and present what will be acceptable to the people of Kenya. You saw the Central Kenya politicians telling Uhuru that if it is parliament electing president, count us out.
Yes.
And that is a risk that Kenyatta will not take. And therefore, Odinga also wanted some executive premier to come from parliament, hoping that perhaps he will have the numbers to become the first prime minister. So there was need for these two principles to sit with the document, suggest some major amendments, and then tell the group, return it back to us. In my opinion, that is what has been happening.
Okay, how about the security then, before we come to Benji? In the event, because at some point in the maiden months after the coming together of the two gentlemen, Paul Mwangi, the lawyer, said that in the event we hit a snag, we should not shy away from getting back to the principles for directions. What about the security of, the report here? Could the interest override perhaps what the team might have genuinely looked into in terms of what ails the country?
There is no genuineness in BBI or in any other political agenda in Kenya. It is a game of interests, and the interest will ultimately override what the people of Kenya would want to have.
Okay. In the event then politically, Central Kenya would not fancy a parliamentary system of governance, as is the case with the successful, nature of how it has happened in Japan or in Britain regarding the parliamentary systems of governance. Central Kenya doesn't want that because it will lose the political tyranny here in terms of the influence it has or the grip on the political establishment in the country. Raila Odinga, in the event, he wants a parliamentary system, and Central Kenya, the president backyard says no. With that regard, hapo hapana. What about the clash of interest here? Will it mark an end to the coming together of the two gentlemen, and what does it mean politically for the country?
I can tell you for free that the document which will be presented to His Excellency the President tomorrow and the Prime Minister is an agreeable document. Is a document that the two have seen. They are not going to get a strange document tomorrow. Forget about what President Kenyatta told us at Sagana, that he does not understand the contents of Building Bridges Initiative. He is fully aware, the Prime Minister is fully aware, and they are receiving that document knowing what they are receiving. And therefore, they've already agreed on it. It's up to the President to wipe Central Kenya into it, and the Prime Minister to wipe the rest of Kenya into it.
So nothing will be on the way of the two gentlemen?
Nothing will be on the way of the two gentlemen.
You know, I actually want to, I like his honesty, professor from University of Nairobi, Echesa. I'm just sitting here listening to you guys, and I said, let me pose this challenge on air, just so we can kind of all of us digest it. It's more of a philosophical question. And it's a question to him and also maybe to you, Ayub. I'm sitting here listening to both of you guys talking about the former prime minister in some sort of negotiation for interests with the president, negotiation for interest on a controversial document. Apparently it's being unveiled tomorrow, but they've already been pre-briefed. They know what the contents are. It puts us back into not only campaign mode, but also into division. And I'm just wondering, Raila Odinga sat with the president of Kenya on a similar process as prime minister 10 years ago to negotiate for what they called a piece of the cake, a piece of the pie, a piece of bread. And now sits again in the same position with the president of Kenya, who happens to be now the proverbial son of the former president. How does that, what's going on here? How does that sit with, is that normal? Is that proper? Is that ordinary? What do you think the real issue is? That we are in this never-ending vortex where Raila Odinga is an agitator for something, and it just keeps going round in circles. I really honestly cannot believe that, President Kibaki baptized President Uhuru.
In what way?
Baptized. His Uru's name is
Yes.
no, his actual name.
His actual name.
Yeah, his actual name.
Because
Okay.
he was present during his birth.
Yes, he was present during his birth and baptized him. And what do you guys think, Prof, that, Raila was in this whole sharing of power, conceptualizing power, etc., with PNU under Kibaki and now again under Uhuru. It just doesn't sit right with me at all. I don't know what you guys think.
Okay, before we come to Kaberia, you'll of course want to respond to that.
Yes.
Is Raila the constant or the variable factor for in this case?
I think Raila has been a constant factor. And Raila has been successful in rallying Kenyans, or what we call the rest of Kenya, around his agenda. And this began in the year 2007 when it was said that there was no presidential winner. And at least our commission told us that there was no outright winner. All thing that we can all take home without arguing is that Kalonzo lost the 2007 elections. But as who won, we cannot be told who won this particular election. And that is where Raila reinvented himself and presented himself as a victim. And he has remained a victim to date. In every election, whether he loses or whether he wins or whether he is rigged out, he is able to come out as a victim to more than half of this nation. And therefore, when he makes a political statement, people have identified with his philosophy. They are looking at him as a man who has been sinned against more than what he has sinned. And because of Raila bringing himself out more of a movement or a philosophical object, most of Kenyans are unable to think beyond what Raila means and interrogate him. And some are senior professors, some are senior intellectuals who say that Raila is a victim. Raila has been robbed of victory more than enough times. And therefore, Raila's agenda is Kenya's agenda. From the day we made Raila agenda Kenya's agenda, we forgot about Raila's past. We forgot about Raila's sins. And that is why Kenyans of particular philosophy are able to do anything to push Raila's agenda. And two, it's only Raila who has been able to rally some form of agenda uniformly, even if he does not believe in it, and he has convinced Kenyans that he stands for reforms. When you interrogate that keenly, you may get otherwise, but he has been in position to tell Kenyans, look here, I am the best bet.
And they bet, and of course the bet is never sure. We take a breather, and we're coming back after this, a short break.